Good morning to all of you present there in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in the balcony, or in the veranda. Speaking in front of a machine is more difficult than speaking in front of an audience. But there is certainly one great advantage. The machine will not ask you to shut up, though it may shut down for other reasons. Dear friends, I am conscious of the fact that most of you are now enjoying or suffering from work at home, domestic work, rather than work from home. And it is not fair to impose a heavy burden upon your overworked brain cells by talking something abstract. My presentation is therefore going to be simple, anecdotal, and devoid of complex issues of law. The topic that I have chosen for this brief discourse is government departments and the statutory authorities in arbitration. All that I am going to focus here are only two things, namely, one, the misadventurous experiments carried out by the states of Orissa and Kerala by way of amendments to the arbitration acts in the context of domestic arbitration, and number two, an award passed in an investment treaty arbitration by a tribunal at Singapore against the Government of India. But before I take a plunge into the above, a small prelude may be necessary for the benefit of the younger members of the bar, so that they know what actually happens, at least in domestic arbitrations, in which one of the parties is a government department or a statutory authority. The Economic Times carried a report in its edition dated January 13, 2020, indicating that the National Highways Authority of India was involved in 180 cases in arbitration at that time, with claims totaling to a staggering figure of rupees 70,000 crores, and that they were looking at a settlement of a majority of them through conciliation, as arbitration was considered by NHAI to have proven to be a long drawn process. A story published in the Times of India on October 11, 2019 carried a very interesting caption: Arbitration claims stump NHAI as it stares at rupees 18,000 crores output payout. The report showed that the claims made by some of the builders against NHAI was unconscionably high. According to the newspaper report, one builder had made claims to the tune of rupees 8,199 crores in respect of a project whose cost was rupees 629 crores. In other words, according to the report, the claim in arbitration was 13 times more than the project cost. The report also stated that claims are inflated by parties, and that the same was evident from the fact that in 560 out of 740 arbitrations, claims of rupees 36,000 crores were finalized with awards of rupees 9,000 crores, almost one-fourth. In one of the cases that came up before the Supreme Court in the recent past, the Government of India came up with an allegation that the infrastructure company which was the petitioner before the Supreme Court, was virtually making a business out of arbitration. In support of such a contention, the Government of India produced a chart showing that if X was the total value of the contract, the government itself settled an amount equivalent to twice the value of the contract, namely 2x, on the ground that there were delays and cost overrun. Not satisfied with the settlement of twice the value of the contract, the company raised a dispute and went to arbitration claiming 6 times the value of the contract by way of damages. The company also succeeded in getting awards for an amount thrice the value of the contract, which, according to the Government of India, was made possible by some arbitrators. Enough and more research has been done over the past 2 to 3 decades on how to make India an arbitration hub and how to reduce the role of and interference by courts. Needless to say that the object of such research has been to improve the ease of doing business and to provide an investment friendly climate, which in turn will generate more employment and improve the GDP. This research and the action taken thereafter has also yielded the desired results, since the ease of doing business ranking of India has improved from 142nd position in 2014 to 63rd position in 2019. But no one has so far done any research to find out, at least in respect of those investors who succeed in arbitration, as to how much money was invested and how much was harvested. Many factors, such as the composition of the arbitral tribunal, the choice of the lawyers who defend the government before the tribunal, the assistance that the lawyers receive from the staff of the concerned government department for producing the best of evidence, etc., determine the outcome of the arbitral proceedings. No one, to my knowledge, has done any research on these by at least taking one government department and the awards passed in the arbitrations involving that department during a period of, say, 5 years. Therefore, in a way, the object and purpose of my speech would be to inspire, if possible, and if within my reach, some young and public spirited mind to undertake such a research. With this prelude, let me now tell you 2 stories about the statutory enactments made by the states of Orissa and Kerala, which raised several concerns about the manner in which arbitrations involving government departments were perceivably held. An irrigation project known as the Kallada Irrigation Project was undertaken by the Government of Kerala in 1961. It was the biggest irrigation project at that time, with the total cost estimated at that time at rupees 13.28 crores. Due to a loan and credit agreement entered into with the World Bank for financing the project, a local competitive bidding specification was included in the agreements relating to the execution of the project. Clauses 51 and 52 of the local competitive bidding specification envisaged the settlement of disputes through arbitration. The agreement with the World Bank got terminated with effect from March 31, 1989. But most of the contracts remained incomplete even after several years, despite the fact that the total amount spent till then was around rupees 457 crores as against the original estimated sanctioned cost of rupees 13.28 crores. Rubbing salt on the wound, the contractors raised disputes and invoked the arbitration clause. According to the government of Kerala, very huge, exorbitant, and unconscionable amounts were awarded by the contractors on flimsy grounds, disregarding the conditions of contract. The awards were also upheld by the courts. Aghast at the manner in which they were being arm twisted, the government of Kerala passed an enactment. I do not think any one of you will even be able to comprehend what type of enactment it could be. Hold your breath. The title of the act was Kerala Revocation of Arbitration Clauses and Reopening of Awards Act 1998. That was the title of the act. The act contained three important provisions. They are: number 1, Section 3(1) declared that notwithstanding anything contained in the Arbitration Acts of 1940 or 1996 and the Indian Contract Act, the arbitration clauses contained in all agreements relating to the Kallada irrigation project will stand cancelled, and the authority of the arbitrators appointed till then will stand revoked. Number 2, the parties to such agreements will be entitled to approach the civil courts for the resolution of all their disputes in relation to the said project within 6 months in terms of Section 3, subsection 2, read with Section 4, notwithstanding anything contained in the Limitation Act. The third feature of the Act was that the government will be entitled under Section 5 to file appeals against all the awards within 90 days of commencement of the Act, notwithstanding anything contained in the Arbitration Acts of 1940 or 1996 and in the Limitation Act. Interestingly, the grounds on which the government was made entitled under Section 5 of the Act to file appeals against awards included: number 1, the failure of the government itself to produce relevant data before the arbitrators, and number 2, the amount awarded being unconscionable. While enacting this law, the legislature proceeded on the premise that the arbitrators as well as the staff of the irrigation department acted in collusion with the contractors. An interesting feature to be noted here is that when the project was commissioned and agreements were entered, the 1940 Act was holding the field. The 1940 Act was replaced by the 1996 Act, which came into force on August 22, 1996. Before the Legislative Assembly of Kerala passed the Act, the Governor of Kerala promulgated an ordinance on November 13, 1997. It was published in the Government Gazette on November 14, 1997, and it came into force with immediate effect. The ordinance was replaced by a bill which was introduced in the Assembly on March 31, 1998. It was referred to the Subject Committee on April 1, 1998. The Subject Committee recommended the adoption of the bill without any modification. The Act was then passed and it is deemed under Section 1, Subsection 3 to have come into force with effect from November 14, 1997. The Act was reserved for the consideration of the President and it also received the assent of the President. Therefore, the state of Kerala thought that the law was saved by Article 254 Clause 2 of the Constitution, since arbitration is found in entry 13 of list 3, concurrent list of the 7th schedule. The constitutional validity of the Kerala Act was challenged before the High Court in a batch of writ petitions. The challenge was made in 1998 and it got resolved only in 2013 after a lapse of 15 years. But before I tell you what the outcome of the challenge was, I must tell you something that had happened earlier in the state of Orissa, almost on similar lines, but which was less shocking than the one that happened in Kerala. The state of Orissa amended the Arbitration Act 1940, first in the year 1982, next in 1984, and then in 1991. By the Amendment Act of 1982, the state of Kerala inserted Section 41 capital A in the Principal Act, providing for reference of all disputes to which the state is a party to an arbitral tribunal comprising of a member of the State Judicial Service, an officer of the Public Works Department, and a member of the State Financial Service. The amendment also provided for the automatic transfer of all arbitrations pending before any arbitrator on the date of commencement of the Amendment Act, provided no award had been made till then. Section 41 capital A inserted under the amendment contained a non-abstente clause and hence prevailed over the other provisions of the 1940 Act wherever there was any conflict. Within less than 2 years of the said amendment, the state of Orissa came up with another amendment in 1984 providing for the constitution of a special arbitral tribunal comprising of one or more retired judges of the High Court to deal with claims of rupees 1 crore and above. Both the 1982 and 1984 amendments did not seek to annul any award already made, though they sought to transfer the proceedings pending before any arbitrator to the tribunal constituted under the Amendment Acts. But in 1991, another amendment was issued by the state of Orissa, which went too far. By this amendment, reference of a claim of rupees 1 crore and above to the Special Arbitral Tribunal was made possible only if the amount agreed to by the parties in the contract was more than half of the amount of the claim. This amendment was made applicable even to the awards already made, irrespective of whether they have been made rules of court or not under the 1940 Act. All references already made were also annulled by this amendment if the condition stipulated by this amendment was not satisfied. The constitutional validity of the Orissa Amendment of 1991 was challenged before the Supreme Court by way of writ petitions by two contractors. In a decision reported as G.C. Kanunga versus State of Orissa, 1995, 5 SCC 96, the Supreme Court declared the Orissa Amendment of 1991 unconstitutional, not on the ground that it was beyond the legislative competence of the Assembly, not even on the ground that the awards passed by the special arbitral tribunals merged with the judgments and decrees of courts which made the awards rules of court under the 1940 Act, but solely on the ground that the amendment encroached upon the judicial powers of the state conferred upon special tribunals. The decision in Kanungo versus State of Orissa was delivered on May 12, 1995. The Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996 came into force on August 22, 1996. The Kerala State Enactment came into force with effect from November 14, 1997, with a non-abstente clause excluding the application of the Arbitration Acts of 1940 and 1996 to the state of Kerala insofar as matters stipulated in the state enactment were concerned. Writ petitions challenging the virus of the Kerala Act were filed before the High Court of Kerala in the year 1998. Eventually, a division bench of the Kerala High Court declared the Kerala Act as unconstitutional in a decision reported as James Verghese versus State of Kerala. The decision was rendered on July 9, 2013, after 15 years of the enactment. Curiously, the High Court of Kerala did not follow the ruling of the Supreme Court in Kanungo, to the effect that the state had the competence in terms of entry 13 of list 3 read with article 254(2). On the contrary, the High Court of Kerala held that the Arbitration Act of 1996 was enacted in tune with UNCITRAL model law to cover not merely domestic arbitrations but also international commercial arbitrations, and hence the power to legislate has to be traced to entries 10 to 14 of list 1 also, which deal with foreign affairs, etc., including the entering into treaties and agreements. Therefore, the High Court of Kerala held that the Union of India had the exclusive power to legislate under Article 253. As a result, the Kerala High Court held that the State Assembly had no legislative competence to enact the 1998 law in relation to such a matter. Therefore, the court held that the presidential assent given to the Kerala Act will not save it. While the rule of law ultimately prevailed in both cases, one cannot lose sight of the fact that the governments had their own grievances about the way arbitral tribunals functioned in those days. While the statement of objects and reasons and the preamble to the Kerala Act contained a very specific allegation that the arbitrators as well as the officials acted in collusion and awards passed in an unconscionable manner, the statement of objects and reasons of the Orissa enactment contained similar allegations but couched in a sophisticated language. What is to be deduced from these two experiments, one from Orissa and another from Kerala, is that though very serious allegations formed the basis for those two state enactments, the courts could not go into the truth or otherwise of the same, since what were in issue were pure and simple questions of constitutional law, which did not require any fact finding. Therefore, the truth lay buried deep in the files of these two governments. Having flagged the legislative adventures, let me now move over to the second aspect, namely an award passed in an UNCITRAL arbitration by an international tribunal in what came to be known as White Industries Australia Limited versus the Republic of India. An Australian company by name White Industries Australia Limited entered into a contract with Coal India in September 1989 for the supply of equipment and development of coal mines in India. Though the contract was to be governed by Indian law, it specifically excluded the operation of the Indian Arbitration Act 1940, but contained an arbitration clause requiring the parties to arbitrate all disputes under the ICC arbitration rules. Disputes arose and they were referred to an ICC tribunal in 1999. An award was passed by a majority of 2:1 in 2002, directing payment of certain sums of money by Coal India to the Australian company. Coal India filed an application in the first week of September 2002 under Section 34 of the 1996 before the High Court of Calcutta to set aside the award. But the Australian company filed an application in the second week of September 2002 before the High Court of Delhi to have the award enforced. After receipt of notice in the application to set aside the award, the Australian company moved an application before the Supreme Court for transfer of the petition under Section 34 from the High Court of Calcutta to the High Court of Delhi, where the application for enforcement was pending. In January 2003, the transfer petition was withdrawn by the Australian company. Therefore, the Australian company thereafter moved an application in March 2003 before the Calcutta High Court seeking rejection of the application under Section 34. In November 2003, a single judge of the Calcutta High Court dismissed the Australian company's application to reject the petition filed under Section 34. The division bench confirmed the order of the single judge in May 2004, and the Australian company filed an appeal before the Supreme Court in July 2004. Since the Supreme Court was seized for the matter, the Delhi High Court could not proceed with the application for enforcement of the award. In January 2008, a two-member bench of the Supreme Court referred the appeal filed by the Australian company against the judgment of the Calcutta High Court to a three-member bench to be tagged along with Balco, where the correctness of the view taken in Bhatia International and Venture Global Engineering were in question. According to the Australian company, several attempts made by their Indian counsel to mention the matter orally before the Supreme Court and to have it listed for hearing failed. Therefore, in the year 2009, contending that the inability of the Indian courts to enforce an award for a period of 7 years from 2002 to 2009 tantamount to a breach of Articles 3, 4, 7 and 9 of the Bilateral Investment Treaty, the Australian company launched a claim for a sum of Australian dollars 10 million against the Government of India towards loss and damages. As there was no response from the Indian government, the Australian company invoked Article 12 of the Bilateral Investment Treaty, which provided for the reference of the dispute to an ad hoc tribunal constituted in accordance with the arbitration rules of UNCITRAL. Before the arbitral tribunal, the Australian company advanced several arguments, two of which are necessary to be noted. The first contention was that Article 3, Clause 2 of the Bilateral Investment Treaty between India and Australia assured fair and equitable treatment to the investor, and that denial of justice gave rise to a breach of the said FET standard, fair and equitable treatment standard. It was contended by the Australian company that the entertainment by an Indian court of an application to set aside the award and the shocking delay on the part of the Indian courts in dealing with the application for the enforcement of the award amounted to denial of justice, and as a consequence it violated the FET standard. Therefore, the Australian company contended that the Government of India was obliged to compensate them. The second important contention of the Australian company before the tribunal was that the Indian court's delay of 9 years in enabling them to enforce an international arbitration award was directly attributable to the failure of the Republic of India to provide effective means of asserting and enforcing the rights under the award, rights under the treaty, and that therefore it constituted a breach of Article 4, Clause 2 of the BIT. Interestingly, Article 4, Clause 2 of the BIT that India had with Australia did not contain a clause relating to effective means of asserting claims and enforcement of rights. But the Australian company drew parallel from another BIT that India had with Kuwait. The BIT that India had with Kuwait had a clause in Article 4, Clause 5, assuring effective means of asserting claims and enforcing awards, rights. The contention of the Australian company was that there was an obligation on the part of the Republic of India to treat investments made in its territory on a basis no less favorable than that accorded to investments of investors of any third country. In other words, they claimed that the investments of all countries deserved parity of treatment. It will be interesting to note that while responding to the contention regarding denial of justice, the Government of India conceded before the arbitral tribunal that the state may, in principle, be liable for the acts of its judiciary. After accepting this position, the Republic of India relied upon the opinion of the Mondev Tribunal to the effect that the test for denial of justice is a stringent one and that it sets a high threshold. It requires a demonstration of particularly serious shortcomings and an egregious conduct that shocks or at least surprises a sense of judicial propriety. The arbitral tribunal, while dealing with the question of denial of justice resulting in the alleged breach of a FET standard, recorded a finding that the failure of the Indian Supreme Court to dispose of the matter, particularly in the context of its functioning, was not surprising or shocking. Accordingly, the tribunal rejected the claim of breach of Article 3.2 based on denial of justice. But the tribunal read into Article 4.2 of the BIT the effective means of assertion and enforcement of rights standard prescribed in Article 4.5 of the BIT that India had with Kuwait and concluded as follows, I quote, Indian judicial system's inability to deal with White Industries' jurisdictional claim in over 9 years and the Supreme Court's inability to hear White's jurisdictional appeal for over 5 years amounts to undue delay and constitutes a breach of India's voluntarily assumed obligation of providing White Industries with effective means of asserting claims and enforcing rights. Unquote. After so holding, the tribunal awarded around 4 million Australian dollars as compensation payable by the Government of India. This amount was directed to be paid together with Australian dollars 84,000 towards fees and expenses of arbitrators and Australian dollars 500,000 towards arbitral expenses. These amounts were directed to be paid together with interest at 8% per annum from March 1998 till the date of payment. It is important to note that the award of the arbitral tribunal was passed at Singapore in November 2011, but it came to light in the public domain much later. This is for the reason that such awards are to be kept confidential as per the treaties. It is an irony of fate that Balco was decided within a few months of the decision of the arbitral tribunal. Balco was actually decided on September 6, 2012, overruling Bhatia and Venture Global and holding that the Indian courts cannot set aside foreign awards by resorting to Part 1 of the Act. Since White Industries case arising out of the dismissal of their application by the Calcutta High Court to reject the Section 34 petition as not maintainable was also tagged along with Balco, they virtually succeeded when Balco was decided. Thus, the only impediment in the way of White Industries enforcing the ICC award passed against Coal India got removed with the decision in Balco rendered in September 2012. As of now, I do not have any information whether White Industries got executed both the awards, namely the one passed against the Government of India at Singapore in 2011 and the other passed against Coal India earlier by the ICC Arbitral Tribunal in 2002. Dear friends, I do not know how many of you have heard about Mr. Samuel Gompers, a Jewish immigrant trade union leader in the United States of America who lived in the 19th and 20th centuries. He founded the American Federation of Labor in the context of mandatory arbitration clauses in employment contracts. Samuel Gompers said something very interesting. It goes as follows, I quote, "Do I believe in arbitration? Yes, I do, but not in the arbitration between the lion and the lamb, in which the lamb is in the morning found inside the lion." I unquote. It is for you to find out, maybe on a case-to-case basis or otherwise, who is the lion and who is the lamb in contracts to which government, government departments and the statutory authorities are parties. Dear friends, with these few words, I thank the MBA and the MBA Academy for giving this wonderful opportunity to me and to provide you an opportunity to spend your time usefully in times of this lockdown. Thank you very much.